Welcome to this video, my friend. Before we begin, I want you to take a deep breath because what you're about to hear is not just another motivational talk, it's a rebuilding plan for your life. If you've been smiling in public but breaking in private, if you've lost your energy, your direction, or even yourself, this video is for you. Today, we're not just going to talk about motivation. We're going to rebuild you step by step. And as we do, you'll also learn English, real emotional English that connects to your heart. So you're not just learning words, you're learning strength, hope, and confidence. So close every other tab, silence your phone, and listen with your heart. Because this might be the video that doesn't just teach you English, it teaches you how to rise again. Chapter 1. When Everything Falls Apart. There are moments in life when everything feels heavy. You wake up, but it doesn't feel like morning. The light outside seems cold. The air feels thick. And the silence around you is louder than any noise. That's where Leo was. A man who once had energy, ideas, and plans, but somehow they all slipped away. It didn't happen in one big crash. It happened slowly, quietly, like a candle burning out. One day he stopped dreaming. The next he stopped trying. And before he realized it, he wasn't living anymore. He was just existing. Leo used to have a job he loved. He worked in a small design company surrounded by bright colors, coffee smell, and laughter. He believed in creativity, in making something beautiful. But one day, his company closed. He told himself it was only temporary. He said, "I'll find something new." Weeks passed, then months. Rejections piled up. Bills grew taller. His hope grew smaller. He began to question everything. Was he really good enough? Was his best already behind him? He stopped waking up early. He stayed in bed late, scrolling through social media, comparing his broken life to the perfect lives of others. Every photo, every smile, every success story felt like a reminder of his failure. He started avoiding friends because he couldn't answer their questions. "How are you doing? Found a new job yet?" He smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." But inside he was sinking. It wasn't just his career that collapsed. It was his confidence. It was his sense of who he was. At night, Leo would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. The room felt too small. His thoughts felt too loud. He replayed old memories, times when he laughed, when he had a purpose. He asked himself the same question again and again. When did I lose myself? Sometimes he blamed the world. Sometimes he blamed luck. But deep down, he blamed himself. He began to believe that he was the problem, that maybe he wasn't meant to be happy, that maybe life had already decided his fate. There was a time when he used to talk to his family every day, but now his phone stayed silent. He had stopped calling. He didn't want anyone to hear the sadness in his voice. He didn't want pity, so he built a wall of silence around his pain. On the outside, he seemed calm. On the inside, he was crumbling. His home became a reflection of his mind, messy, unorganized, heavy. Empty coffee cups on the desk, unread books on the shelf, clothes on the floor. Everything felt like a reminder of how much he had stopped caring. Sometimes Leo looked out the window and watched people walking fast, heading to work, meeting friends, living their lives. He envied them. He wondered how they kept moving while he felt stuck. He wished he could press a button and restart everything. But instead, he sat there scrolling through his phone again, lost in the endless loop of distraction. The days blended together. Morning, night, morning again. Nothing changed. The clock kept moving, but Leo did not. Then came a day unlike the others. A gray, quiet morning, the kind that feels empty before it even begins. Leo sat on his bed staring at the floor. His phone buzzed beside him. Another job rejection. He didn't even open it. His chest felt tight, his head heavy. And in that moment, something inside him broke, not loudly but softly, like glass cracking. He stood up and walked to the mirror. The man looking back didn't feel familiar. His eyes were tired. His face was pale. His shoulders were bent, not by weight, but by years of disappointment. He whispered to his reflection, "I can't live like this anymore." The words were quiet, but they shook something deep inside him. For the first time, he didn't try to pretend. He didn't smile. He didn't lie to himself. He just stood there, face to face with his truth. It wasn't strength that made him speak. It was pain. But sometimes, pain is the first spark of change. Leo sat down and took a deep breath. His room was still messy. His phone was still full of unanswered messages. But something had shifted. He realized that he didn't need to have all the answers yet. He just needed to stop sinking. He didn't know how to rebuild, but he knew he couldn't stay broken forever. And that small realization, as fragile as it was, became the first light in his darkness. Outside, the world was still moving fast. Cars passed. People laughed. The city continued without noticing his quiet moment of awakening. But inside Leo's room, something new began. A thought, a whisper, a seed of possibility. He didn't know it yet, but this was the start of everything. The beginning of rebuilding. The moment when falling stopped and standing began. He looked at the mirror one more time, his eyes softer than before, and he said, almost in a whisper, "Maybe I can start again." That was the moment hope returned. Not loudly, not perfectly, but just enough to move forward. And that small spark was all he needed to take the next step, cleaning the ruins of his old life. Chapter 2. Letting Go of the Old Life. The next morning, Leo woke up to the same room, but for the first time, he really saw it. The curtains were half closed, the air smelled like dust, and the light barely touched the floor. His desk was covered with papers from the past, job applications that never got replies, old notebooks filled with ideas that went nowhere. His chair had clothes hanging on it. His phone blinked with notifications, but none of them brought joy. It all looked like a picture of his mind, crowded, heavy, and tired. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the mess, and then he whispered, "No wonder I feel stuck. I'm living inside my own ruins." The words hurt, but they were true. For months, he had been walking through the same chaos, expecting something new to happen. But how could he rebuild his life if he was still surrounded by the broken pieces of the old one? So he decided to begin, not with big dreams or big plans, but with a broom, a bag, and courage. He opened the window first. The cold air rushed in. It smelled like morning, like movement. It felt strange at first, almost uncomfortable, but it made him breathe deeper. He looked around the room and said quietly, "Let's start small." He picked up an empty cup from his desk, then another, then three more from the floor. He threw away papers, broken pens, old notes that reminded him of projects that failed. Each item he touched carried a small memory, a little disappointment, a reminder of who he used to be. But as the trash bag filled, the air began to feel lighter. The floor slowly reappeared. He cleaned for an hour, then stopped and sat down. sweat on his forehead, heart beating faster. He looked around and noticed something new. A bit of space, a small piece of floor he hadn't seen in months. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to remind him that progress doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to begin. While cleaning, Leo found an old photo. It was of him and his ex-girlfriend smiling at the beach. For a moment, the memories came back. Happy ones, then painful ones. He stared at the picture, unsure what to do. Part of him wanted to keep it, to hold on to what was once good. But another part whispered, "You can't build tomorrow if you keep living in yesterday." He took a deep breath and placed the photo gently in the trash. His hands trembled, but his heart felt lighter. As he continued, he found small things, letters, gifts, even clothes that carried old emotions. Each object had a story, and each story kept him trapped in the past. He began to let them go, one by one. The process was painful. It felt like saying goodbye to parts of himself. But with every goodbye came a little peace. In the afternoon, he opened his phone. Dozens of names filled the screen. People he hadn't talked to in months. Some who only called when they needed something. Others who made him feel small. He scrolled through and stopped at one name. Someone who had hurt him deeply, but whom he never had the strength to remove. His thumb hovered over the delete button. His heart raced. And then, click, deleted. He didn't stop there. One by one, he unfollowed accounts that filled his mind with jealousy, fear, or comparison. People who looked happy but made him feel behind. Influencers who showed perfect lives but never showed real struggle. After a while, his feed looked emptier, but it also felt peaceful. He realized something important. Silence is better than noise that kills your spirit. That night, Leo sat on his now clean bed. The room looked different, not new but fresh. He could see the floor, the desk, the small lamp glowing softly in the corner. He felt proud, not because everything was perfect, but because he had started. He opened his notebook and wrote one sentence. "I'm not finished yet." It was the first positive sentence he had written about himself in a long time. Simple, but true. The next night, he wrote another one. "I'm learning to start again." The third night, "I'm becoming lighter." And with each sentence, his words began to rebuild what the world had broken. Cleaning the rubble wasn't just about removing dust. It was about removing what no longer belonged in his story. He cleaned his space, but he also cleaned his thoughts. When his mind said, "You're still a failure," he answered, "I'm still trying." When it said, "You'll never change," he whispered, "I already have." These tiny conversations were like sweeping the corners of his heart, slowly, gently, consistently. After a week, his home became quiet, not empty. The air smelled like lemon soap and freedom. Every morning he opened the window wide and let the light in. He made his bed. He watered a small plant that had been dying in the corner. He placed it by the sunlight and thought, if it can grow again, so can I. Sometimes cleaning made him cry. Memories surfaced, people he lost, mistakes he made, years he couldn't get back. But he didn't stop. He learned that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space for something new. Every time he threw something away, he repeated a small phrase in his mind. This is not who I am anymore. The mess outside had mirrored the storm inside. But now, as his room grew simpler, his thoughts grew calmer. He started to notice small things. the sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of tea in his hands, the peace of sitting in silence without fear. One night, as he finished cleaning his desk, Leo looked around. The room was finally clear. The same space that once made him feel trapped now felt like a beginning. He turned off the light and lay down, staring at the ceiling. There was no noise, no clutter, just stillness. And in that stillness, he smiled, a real, quiet smile, because he understood something important. Rebuilding doesn't start by adding more. It starts by removing what no longer serves you. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, old life. You taught me enough," and in that soft moment, surrounded by peace, Leo felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, the kind that doesn't shout, but hums gently inside the heart. Hope that tomorrow he could begin again. That hope was the first step toward forgiveness in the next chapter of his rebuilding journey. Chapter 3. Making Peace with the Past. Days passed and Leo's room stayed clean. The air felt lighter. The light fell softly across his desk. And for the first time in months, his mornings had rhythm. But inside, something was still heavy. Even though the space around him was clear, the space inside him was still full of noise. The kind of noise that whispers when the world is quiet. Regret, shame, the echo of what if and why did I. He had cleaned the rubble, yes, but not the guilt buried beneath it. He still carried it everywhere, like a shadow. It followed him when he woke up, when he worked, when he tried to sleep. It reminded him of every mistake he had ever made, every word he wished he hadn't said, every dream he had abandoned too early. One evening, as the rain tapped gently on his window, Leo sat at his desk, feeling that familiar weight. He opened a drawer and found an old envelope. Inside was a letter from his mother. The paper was soft, slightly yellow. Her handwriting was neat, calm, full of love. The letter wasn't long. It simply said, "No matter how far you fall, you can always return home to yourself." Leo read it again and again. He hadn't spoken to her in months, not because they were angry, but because he felt ashamed, ashamed of what he had become. She had always believed in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself. And reading those words felt like a light turning on inside him, a small, gentle light that said, "Maybe I don't have to keep punishing myself." He sat quietly for a long time. The rain continued outside. The world was soft and slow, and then he picked up a pen. He opened his notebook and began to write. Not a list, not a plan, but a letter. A letter to himself. At first his hands shook. His words came out unsure, broken, like his thoughts. But slowly he wrote, "Dear me, I forgive you for not knowing better. I forgive you for wasting time. I forgive you for being scared when you should have been brave. I forgive you for trusting people who hurt you. I forgive you for giving up too soon. You were trying. You were tired. You didn't know how to keep going, but you survived, and that means something." Tears rolled down his face as he wrote. But this time, they weren't the heavy tears of self-pity. They were clean, like the rain. Each one washed away a small piece of the guilt he had been carrying. He kept writing. You did your best with what you knew. You made mistakes, yes, but those mistakes taught you things you couldn't have learned otherwise. You learned who you are. You learned what you need. You learned that even pain has purpose. So thank you, old me. Thank you for walking through fire, even when no one saw the flames. When he finished, Leo placed the pen down and just stared at the page. His hands were trembling, but his heart felt calm. The words on the paper were more than sentences. They were medicine. For so long he had believed that forgiveness was something he had to earn, that he could only forgive himself after he became successful again, or after he proved he was better. But that night he understood the truth. Forgiveness isn't a reward, it's a beginning. You forgive yourself not because you've changed, but so that you can change. He closed his eyes and imagined his younger self standing in front of him. The boy who used to dream without fear, who used to laugh easily, who used to believe that life could be good. That boy had lost his way, yes, but he had also carried Leo through the darkest nights. Leo whispered, "I forgive you." And in his mind, the boy smiled. The next morning, Leo woke up lighter. The air felt different, or maybe it was him. He looked in the mirror and saw the same face, but something had softened. His eyes didn't look lost anymore. They looked alive. Forgiveness hadn't changed his past, but it had changed the way he looked at it. He no longer saw failure. He saw lessons. He no longer saw wasted time. He saw growth. He made himself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the sun rise slowly. The world outside was still full of noise, but inside there was peace. For the first time in years, his mind was quiet. He opened his notebook again and wrote a new sentence. I am not my mistakes. I am my learning. The words were simple, but they carried power. Every time he repeated them, he felt his heart loosen a little more. He started to understand that guilt had kept him stuck because it told him he didn't deserve another chance. But forgiveness whispered something different. You do. Throughout the day, small memories came back. Moments when he had been unkind to himself, when he had called himself stupid, lazy, or useless. But instead of pushing them away, he spoke to them. I forgive you for that, he said quietly. You were doing your best. Each time he did, the voice in his head grew gentler. That evening, Leo went for a walk. The air was cool. The city lights shimmered on wet streets. He noticed people laughing, cars rushing by, a child running with an umbrella too big for his hands. And for the first time, Leo didn't feel separate from the world. He felt part of it again. Forgiveness had opened a door, not to his old life, but to a new one waiting to be built. When he returned home, he placed the letter from his mother on the wall above his desk. It was a reminder that even broken hearts can come home. Below it, he pinned his own letter, the one that began with Dear Me. He looked at both letters together and smiled. They felt like two voices finally meeting, one from the past, one from the present, both speaking the same truth. You are still worthy. Before bed, he whispered, thank you, to no one in particular. Maybe to life, maybe to himself. And as he drifted to sleep, the last thought in his mind was quiet but powerful. If I can forgive the old me, I can create someone new. That thought would become the bridge to his next step, building the person he truly wanted to be. Chapter 4. Becoming the person you want to be. Forgiveness gave Leo peace, but it also left a question behind. Who am I now? For years, his identity had been built around failure. He had been the man who lost everything, the one who couldn't finish, the one who disappeared. These labels weren't given by others. They were given by himself. Every time he said, I can't, or I'm not that kind of person, he made the cage around him stronger. But now that cage had cracks. He could finally see a small light shining through. And one morning, sitting at his desk with his notebook open, Leo decided to do something he had never done before. He decided to design himself, not the way the world saw him, but the way he wanted to become. He wrote a single question on the first page. Who do I want to be? For a moment his mind went blank. Then slowly the words came. I want to be calm. I want to be focused. I want to be confident. I want to be kind, not only to others, but to myself. The words looked simple on paper, but they felt powerful, like a blueprint, a plan to rebuild his life from the ground up. He looked at them and thought, what would that kind of man do every day? A calm man wouldn't rush in the morning. A focused man wouldn't scroll on his phone for hours. A confident man wouldn't stay silent when he needed to speak. A kind man wouldn't call himself a failure. So he began small. The next morning, Leo stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, I am learning. I am improving. I am rebuilding. It felt strange at first, like pretending. His voice trembled. He didn't believe every word, but he said it again, slower this time, with more breath. I am learning. I am improving. I am rebuilding. Something in his chest stirred. Not excitement, something quieter. Belief. He realized that he had been waiting to feel ready before changing, but now he understood. You don't wait for confidence. You create it through action. You don't wait for clarity. You find it by moving forward. You don't wait to believe. You begin, and belief follows. That day, Leo made a decision. From now on, he would act like the person he wanted to become, even before he felt like him. When he walked to the store, he lifted his head higher. When he spoke to the cashier, he smiled, clearly, politely. When he sat at his desk, he sat straight, with purpose. Tiny details, small actions, but each one whispered to his mind, this is who we are now. He stopped calling himself lazy. Instead, he said, I'm building new habits. He stopped saying, I'm not good at English. Instead, he said, I'm learning to speak better every day. Each new sentence became a brick in his foundation. He made a promise to himself. One small rule: never speak against the person he wanted to be. If his thoughts turned dark, he would replace them with light. If he caught himself saying, I can't, he would answer, I can try. One evening, he met an old friend, Daniel. Daniel laughed and said, You've changed, man. You seem calmer. Leo smiled softly and replied, I'm becoming. It wasn't pride, it was peace. But not every day was easy. Some mornings he woke up tired. Some days he didn't believe the voice in the mirror. The old Leo tried to come back, whispering, You're still the same. And for a while Leo listened. He'd feel that old pull, the comfort of failure, the familiarity of self-doubt. But then he'd remember something. He had already chosen. He wasn't waiting for life to choose for him anymore. He opened his notebook again and wrote, Today I will be who I said I would be. Then he stood up and started living that sentence. He began to notice small differences. His thoughts became clearer, his movements slower, more intentional. He took time to breathe before reacting. When problems came, he didn't panic. He asked himself, what would the calm version of me do? And then he acted like that person. That question became his compass. Every decision, big or small, passed through it. And little by little, the identity of the old Leo, the broken, fearful, guilty one, began to fade. In its place, a new version started to grow. He even changed his surroundings to match his new self. He bought a small plant for his desk and named it Growth. Every morning when he watered it, he said aloud, We're growing together. He added one sticky note to his wall each week. Words like focus, courage, consistency, peace. His room was turning into a reflection of his mind, no longer full of rubble, but full of reminders. One afternoon, as he sat with a cup of coffee, Leo realized something beautiful. Change didn't feel dramatic anymore. It felt natural. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. But it was real. He no longer felt like a man trying to escape his past. He felt like a man building his future. He smiled to himself and whispered, "I am not pretending anymore. This is who I am becoming." That evening, he wrote in his notebook again, "I'm calm, not because life is easy, but because I've learned to breathe. I'm focused, not because I know everything, but because I choose one thing at a time. I'm confident, not because I never fall, but because I always rise." Every sentence was simple, yet powerful. And for English learners like him, each word became a practice, not only in language, but in identity. That night, as he lay in bed, Leo thought about the journey so far, the fall, the rubble, the forgiveness, the slow rise. He felt proud, but also aware. Rebuilding himself was not about one big decision. It was about repeating small ones every day. Still, something inside him knew he couldn't rely only on motivation. He needed structure, something that could hold him steady when energy was low, when his mind grew tired, when the world felt too heavy again. He looked at the ceiling and whispered, "I'm ready for the next step. I need a system to protect the man I'm becoming." And as he closed his eyes, that thought stayed with him. The quiet awareness that if identity is the foundation, routine is the wall that keeps it standing. Tomorrow he would begin building that wall. It would be called his survival routine. Chapter 5. Small Steps That Keep You Alive. The next morning, Leo woke up before his alarm. It was still quiet outside, the kind of early silence that feels like a clean page. For a few seconds, he just lay there, listening to his heartbeat. He didn't feel strong. He didn't feel excited. But he remembered the promise he had made the night before, to build a system that could carry him even on the days he didn't feel like walking. He sat up, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Let's begin." Leo realized that when life falls apart, people try to rebuild by doing too much. They make long lists, set impossible goals, and then burn out after a few days. That used to be him, but now he wanted something different. A routine so small and simple that he could keep it even when he was tired or sad. A survival routine. Not a plan for success, but a pattern that would keep him alive and moving. He started with one easy rule: drink water before anything else. He walked to the kitchen, filled a glass, and drank slowly. It was such a small thing, yet it felt powerful, like telling his body, "We're still here." The water tasted like renewal, like the first kind act of the day. Then came the second rule: move for 5 minutes. He didn't go to the gym or lift weights. He just stretched, touched his toes, rolled his shoulders, took deep breaths, and walked around the room. Each movement woke him up a little more. He could almost feel his blood saying, "Thank you." His thoughts, which used to spin in confusion, started to slow down. After that, he opened his notebook and wrote one sentence: "Today I will stay calm." It wasn't poetry. It wasn't long, but it gave his mind direction. He realized that when you start your day by choosing your focus, you guide your energy instead of letting it control you. Then he cleaned something small, his desk. It only took 3 minutes. He stacked his notebooks, threw away an old receipt, wiped the surface. The act was simple, but the effect was deep. His environment felt clear, and so did his thoughts. He smiled and whispered, "One small, clean space makes a clean mind." The last step was his favorite: learn for 10 minutes. He played a short English story video on his phone and repeated the sentences aloud. He didn't care about being perfect. He just wanted to stay consistent. Each word felt like a seed planted in his brain, tiny, invisible, but full of potential. Learning gave him a sense of progress, a feeling that he was still growing, even on quiet days. 5 steps, 15 minutes. That was it. At first, it didn't seem like much, but that was the beauty of it. Small enough to finish, strong enough to matter. When he completed all 5, he wrote a note in his notebook. "I did it." It wasn't pride that he felt, it was relief, because for once, he had kept a promise to himself. The next day, he repeated the routine. He drank water, he moved, he wrote, he cleaned, he learned. Day after day, he showed up. Not perfectly. Some mornings he overslept. Some days he felt lazy. But he always came back. The power wasn't in doing it all, it was in doing it again. A week passed, then 2. Leo began to notice changes, not dramatic ones, but quiet ones. He woke up earlier without forcing himself. His thoughts were lighter. His room stayed cleaner without effort. His English speaking became clearer. Most of all, he started to feel a gentle rhythm in his life, a steady beat that guided him through each day. It wasn't just a routine anymore. It was his anchor. One rainy morning, Leo felt that familiar heaviness return, the kind that whispers, "What's the point?" For a moment, he wanted to stay in bed, scroll on his phone, disappear into old habits. But then he remembered his 5 steps. They were small, but they were waiting for him. So he got up, half-heartedly at first. He drank the water. He stretched. He wrote his sentence. "Today I will show up." He cleaned his bedside table. He watched a short English video. And by the time he finished, the heaviness had lifted just a little. He realized something profound. Discipline is not about being strong. It's about being gentle but consistent. The routine was not punishment, it was care. Each step was like telling his body and mind, "You matter." Sometimes while cleaning, he would whisper simple English sentences. "I am moving forward. I am not stuck. I am learning." Each one was a seed of belief growing quietly inside him. After a month, Leo noticed that the mornings no longer felt like a battle. They felt like a beginning. He even started to add small variations: a short walk outside, 5 minutes of quiet meditation, or a simple breakfast at his clean desk. He found comfort in repetition. The small actions that once felt meaningless had become his safety net. People around him noticed too. His neighbor greeted him one morning and said, "You look different lately." Happier, Leo smiled. "I'm just keeping small promises," he said, because that's what the survival routine really was, a collection of small promises. Each time he kept one, he rebuilt trust in himself. At night, he started another ritual. Before sleeping, he reviewed his 5 steps and whispered, "I did my best today." It became his new lullaby, a soft ending to his days of effort and care. Sleep came easier now, not filled with regrets, but with peace. He understood something simple yet powerful. You don't rebuild your life in a day. You rebuild it in minutes, 5 here, 10 there. Each action is a brick. Each brick becomes a wall. Each wall protects the person you are becoming. One morning while stretching, Leo looked at his reflection and said aloud, I'm still learning, but I'm proud of how far I've come. His voice didn't shake this time. It was calm, steady, certain. He realized that this routine had done more than structure his day. It had reshaped his identity. It had taught him control in chaos, rhythm in confusion, and quiet strength in weakness. The old Leo used to wait for motivation. The new Leo understood that momentum was stronger. Motivation visits you. Momentum stays with you. As he finished his stretches, he opened the window. The sunlight poured in, warm and gentle. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled. The small steps had become his foundation. The survival routine wasn't just keeping him alive, it was helping him grow. And over the next few weeks, Leo would discover something even deeper. When the body starts to move, the mind begins to heal. That truth would lead him to his next lesson, movement as medicine. Chapter 6. Move your body, move your mind. For a long time, Leo believed that change began in the mind. He thought he had to think positive first to fix his thoughts before he could move forward. But one morning, he discovered something simple and powerful. Sometimes the body moves first, and the mind follows. It began quietly. The sun was just rising, painting the sky with soft colors of gold and blue. Leo stood by his window, staring outside. The streets were empty, but the world felt awake. He had already done his survival routine. Water, stretch, write, clean, learn. Yet that morning, something inside him said, "Go outside." He hadn't gone for a walk in months. The idea made him nervous. What if people looked at him? What if he didn't feel better afterward? But another thought whispered back, "You've spent enough time sitting in the same air. Move." So he put on his shoes and stepped out. The first few steps felt strange. The ground felt uneven, the air too cold. But then he took a deeper breath, a real one, not the shallow kind he was used to. The morning air filled his lungs, cool and clean. With every inhale, he felt something old loosening inside him. With every exhale, he let a little pain go. He didn't walk fast. He just walked, slowly, gently, one step, then another. The city was waking up. Distant footsteps, the sound of a bicycle bell, a bird calling from a rooftop. These small sounds wrapped around him like music. For the first time in years, his thoughts were quiet. He wasn't planning. He wasn't worrying. He was just moving. Halfway down the street, he realized something. His mind felt lighter. Not fixed, not perfect, but lighter. The sadness that used to sit like a stone on his chest didn't feel as heavy. His breath was smoother, his shoulders less tense. It was as if his body had been waiting for this, waiting to be used again, to remind him that he was still alive. He whispered softly, "Movement is medicine." The words felt true the moment he said them. The next day he did it again. 10 minutes, then 15. Some mornings it rained, and he walked anyway, the drops touching his face like a reminder that the world was real and moving and beautiful. Other mornings he watched his shadow stretch long in the sunlight and smiled. He began to see walking not as exercise but as conversation between his body and his soul. Soon Leo added more small movements into his day. After breakfast, he stretched his arms toward the ceiling. He touched his toes. He rolled his neck. He learned to breathe deeply, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He discovered that when he opened his chest, his heart didn't just beat stronger, it felt stronger. One afternoon, he closed the curtains, played soft music, and stood in the middle of the room. Without thinking, he started to sway. Slowly, almost shyly at first, he let the music guide him, not caring about rhythm or steps. He wasn't dancing to look good. He was dancing to feel free. Each movement released something old, something tired. It was like sweeping away sadness with motion. He moved his hands through the air as if painting invisible light. When the music ended, he stood still, breathing, smiling, alive. That day he learned something profound. Emotions live in the body. When you move, you let them go. Movement became his language of healing. When he was angry, he walked faster. When he was tired, he stretched slower. When he was sad, he danced gently. Every movement said, I'm still here. I'm still trying. And the more he moved, the clearer his mind became. Some mornings when the world felt heavy again, Leo didn't fight it with words. He fought it with steps. He walked until the sadness had less power. He breathed until his thoughts lost their sharp edges. The old Leo used to sit and overthink. The new Leo walked and released. As weeks passed, his body changed, but not in the way people usually talk about. It wasn't about muscles or weight. It was about presence. He stood taller now. His eyes were brighter. His breathing was deeper. His movements had purpose. Not rushed, not tense, but alive. People around him noticed. A shopkeeper said, "You seem lighter these days." Leo smiled. "I'm just moving more," he replied. At night, he sometimes thought back to the old days when he would stay in bed, scrolling endlessly, feeling trapped in his own head. Now he understood that stillness had been his prison. Movement was his key. He also began to pair movement with words. While walking, he whispered to himself, "I'm walking into my new life. I'm breathing in peace, breathing out fear. I'm moving, so I'm healing." These words matched the rhythm of his steps. Simple English, simple truths. They became part of him, like poetry written through motion. One morning, as he stood on a small hill overlooking the city, the wind touched his face and pushed his hair back. He closed his eyes and stretched his arms wide. In that moment, he wasn't a man recovering from failure. He was a man becoming free. The ground beneath him, the wind around him, the heartbeat inside him. Everything felt connected. He realized that movement wasn't only healing his body, it was rewiring his mind. When he walked, he solved problems without trying. When he stretched, he forgave people he thought he never could. When he danced, he rediscovered joy. He had learned something schools never taught him. If you move your body, you move your life. Back home, Leo stood in front of the mirror. He saw strength where weakness used to live. Not the loud, showy kind of strength, but quiet, steady strength. The kind that keeps you standing when life tries to knock you down. He smiled and whispered, "I'm not just rebuilding my life. I'm rebuilding my rhythm." As days passed, this rhythm became his peace. The once empty mornings now felt alive. His mind, once a storm, now flowed like gentle wind. And each time he moved, he felt closer to something powerful, himself. One evening, as he cooled down after his walk, he looked at the sunset and thought about how far he had come. His steps had led him out of depression, out of guilt, out of the shadows of the old life, all because he had learned to move, to walk, to breathe, to dance. He took a deep breath and said softly, "My body remembers what my mind forgot, how to live." And now that his body was awake again, he began to notice another secret to rebuilding, the words he spoke every day. Because if movement was the medicine for the body, language would be the medicine for the soul. Chapter 7. Changing your words, changing your life. For most of his life, Leo spoke like a broken man. He didn't realize it at first. His words came out automatically, quietly, like background music he no longer noticed. I can't. I'm tired. It's too late for me. Each word carried weight, like stones in his mouth. Every time he spoke them, they didn't just describe his life. They defined it. His language had become a mirror of his pain, and as long as he spoke in weakness, he stayed weak. One morning, while walking through the park, Leo heard two children playing by a tree. One boy fell down and scraped his knee. The other shouted, "You can do it! Stand up!" And the boy did. He smiled, wiped his tears, and ran again. Those simple words, "You can do it," echoed in Leo's head. He whispered them to himself, just to hear how they sounded in his own voice. I can do it. The words felt strange at first, too big for him, but something deep inside stirred. A spark, a pulse of energy. It was the same feeling he had when he first started walking, when movement became medicine. That night, Leo sat at his desk, opened his notebook, and began to write the sentences he used to say every day. I can't find a job. I'm too tired to try. I'm not good enough. He looked at them for a long time. Then slowly he began to rewrite them, one line at a time. I can find a new path. I'm learning to rest and rise again. I am enough, even when I'm still growing. He read them out loud, one by one, in a calm, steady voice. The room was silent, but his voice filled it with new life. Each word felt like a brick in the foundation of his new self. He realized something powerful that night. Words are tools. If you use weak tools, you build a weak house. But if you use strong words, you build a strong life. So he began to pay attention to every word he spoke. When he caught himself saying, I can't, he changed it to, I'll try. When he wanted to say, I failed, he said, I learned. When he whispered, I'm scared, he added, but I'll go anyway. It wasn't magic, it was practice. Slow, steady, conscious practice. At first it felt unnatural, but every time he replaced a negative word with a positive one, he felt something shift inside him, like moving a small stone from his pocket, lighter, freer. He also practiced speaking English aloud every morning, standing in front of the mirror. I'm learning. I'm improving. I'm getting better every day. He smiled after each one, even if the pronunciation wasn't perfect, because the meaning was perfect. The words carried power, not just for English learning, but for life itself. Soon Leo noticed how language shaped his emotions. On days when he said, I can't handle this, he felt heavy. On days when he said, I'll find a way, his energy returned. His language became a light switch. It could turn hope on or off in a single sentence. One afternoon, his friend Daniel called. Hey man, he said, you sound different lately. Happier, Leo laughed softly. Maybe I just speak differently now. Daniel chuckled. You mean like better grammar? Leo smiled. Not grammar, energy. I'm learning to speak life, not pain. Daniel was quiet for a second, then said, That's powerful. Leo nodded. It was powerful because it was true. Every day after that, Leo created a new list of power sentences. I will keep moving. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I was. I choose peace today. I trust myself to grow. He read them every morning after his walk, letting the rhythm of his voice become his morning music. Sometimes he said them out loud while walking down the street. People looked at him strangely, but he didn't mind. He had spent years speaking silently against himself. Now he was finally speaking for himself. The more he spoke these words, the more they shaped his reality. He began to notice how others spoke too. At a small cafe, he heard someone say, "I'm always unlucky." At the bus stop, another said, "Life just doesn't get better." Leo wanted to reach out and say, "It can. It really can. You just have to change your words first." But he didn't preach. He just kept living his new truth, quietly, consistently. Weeks passed, and his transformation became visible. His eyes were brighter, his tone steadier, his smile natural. People who once looked past him now stopped to talk. His energy had changed, not because his life was perfect, but because his language was. One day while practicing English at home, Leo read a phrase out loud. "Words create worlds." He paused, repeated it slowly, and smiled. "Yes," he whispered, "that's exactly it." His room, once filled with silence, was now full of gentle sound. The sound of a man rebuilding himself with every sentence. He started recording small voice notes to remind himself, "I'm doing my best. I am growing stronger. I forgive myself for my slow days." Each recording became a friend, a voice he could return to when the old thoughts tried to return. And sometimes, when sadness came quietly in the night, he'd whisper to himself, "This is not the end. This is still the middle." The words held him like a warm blanket. He had learned that pain speaks loudly, but hope must be spoken louder. So he made it his habit to end every day with gratitude. Before sleeping, he'd say 3 simple sentences. "I'm thankful for today. I'm proud of my effort. I'll try again tomorrow." They were small words, but they built big peace. One morning, as he walked by a mirror in a shop window, he stopped for a moment. The reflection staring back didn't look like the man who once said, "I can't." It looked like someone who had learned the language of strength. He smiled and whispered, "I will keep going." And his reflection smiled back. Leo had learned many lessons: to forgive, to move, to rebuild. But this one was special, because every step he had taken, every habit he had built, had begun with words. His story was proof that you don't have to change the whole world to change your life. You just have to start with one sentence. And as he walked home that evening, repeating softly to himself, "I am learning, I am improving, I am rebuilding," he felt something deep inside him settle into peace. He wasn't perfect, he wasn't finished, but he was strong. Now Leo was ready for the final step, to give meaning to his journey, to turn his healing into something greater than himself. Chapter 8. Finding Purpose and Protecting Your New Life. Months passed. The days no longer blurred together like they used to. Leo's life now had rhythm. Calm mornings, steady movement, strong words, and peaceful nights. The storms that once swallowed him had become quiet memories. But one evening, as he sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, he felt a deep thought rise within him. Why did all of this happen? Why did he have to lose everything just to find himself again? The question didn't hurt this time. It didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a mirror. He could finally look back at his pain without fear. He saw how every broken moment had carried a lesson, how every fall had prepared him to rise. His pain had not destroyed him. It had built him. He remembered something his mother once told him. When something breaks, you don't have to hide the cracks. You can fill them with gold. She was talking about an old Japanese art called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, they made them beautiful. The break became the art. Leo looked at his reflection in the window and whispered, "I'm Kintsugi." His voice trembled, but his eyes shone. He finally saw it, the gold in his own cracks. His losses had taught him empathy. His loneliness had taught him to listen. His failures had taught him patience. His silence had taught him the value of words. Everything that once felt meaningless now made sense. Pain had been his teacher all along. The next morning, Leo opened his notebook and began to write a new sentence. Not for himself, but for others. "Dear friend, you are not broken. You are rebuilding." He smiled. The sentence was simple, but full of truth. That same day, he created a small online page called Rebuild Daily. It wasn't fancy, just a space to share his story and a few motivational English sentences he had learned to live by. "One day, one step, one word at a time," he wrote in his first post. He didn't expect anyone to notice. He just wanted to give back what had saved him. Small, gentle hope. But within a week, people began to respond. A woman from India wrote, "Your story helped me wake up and walk again." A young man from Brazil said, "I repeat your sentence every day. I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm rebuilding. It helps me speak English and stay strong." Leo read every message with tears in his eyes. For the first time, he saw how his pain had become light for someone else. He realized that sharing his scars didn't make him weak. It made him useful. His story had power not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He began to post regularly, sharing small lessons in simple English. Don't rush your healing. Small steps still count. Speak kindly to yourself. He recorded short videos with his calm voice, speaking slowly so learners could follow along. Each time he said those words out loud, he wasn't just teaching English. He was teaching strength, presence, and faith. Every post was like a quiet ripple in a big ocean. He didn't know how far it would reach, but he knew it mattered, because somewhere, someone might be sitting in the dark, just like he once was, waiting to hear one sentence of hope. One night, as he scrolled through messages from followers around the world, Leo realized something profound. He had found his purpose. His story was no longer just about survival, it was about service. The same pain that once isolated him had now connected him to thousands of hearts. The cracks that once made him ashamed now made him shine. He wrote in his journal, "The same hands that once trembled now build again." He looked at those words and smiled. It was poetry born from truth, but Leo also knew that rebuilding wasn't a one-time event. It was a lifelong act. There would still be bad days, storms, and doubts. The difference now was that he had tools. His routine, his movement, his language, his awareness, and above all, his purpose. He promised himself never to forget what it felt like to fall. Because remembering the darkness helped him protect his light. He didn't want to escape his past. He wanted to honor it. It was his foundation, his story, his proof that healing was possible. So every few weeks, Leo would take a long walk at sunrise, the same way he used to when everything began. The streets looked the same, quiet, golden, peaceful. But he was different. His steps were stronger. His heart was softer. His eyes brighter. As he walked, he whispered his old affirmations, not out of habit, but gratitude. I'm learning. I'm improving. I'm rebuilding. Each sentence now carried history. It wasn't theory, it was lived truth. Sometimes he'd meet strangers along the path, a tired man sitting alone, a woman crying quietly on a bench. He would smile and say, "You'll be okay. Just take one small step today." The words weren't empty. They came from a man who had once needed to hear them himself. One morning while walking near the river, Leo stopped and watched the sunlight reflecting on the water. The ripples sparkled like tiny pieces of gold. He thought about the cracks inside him, all the pain, all the mistakes, all the fear, and he realized they didn't make him less. They made him more understanding, more kind, more real. He whispered to the wind, "Thank you, life, for breaking me enough to rebuild me better." Back home, Leo lit a small candle on his desk and began writing a new letter. Not to his past self this time, but to whoever needed it next. Dear you, if you're reading this, maybe you've fallen. Maybe you feel empty, tired, or lost. I know that place. I've lived there. But I promise it's not the end. The pain you feel right now is not punishment, it's invitation. Life is not asking you to be perfect. It's asking you to begin again. Drink water, move your body, speak kind words, forgive yourself. Start small. That's how I began too. Every time you rebuild, you place gold in your cracks. One day you'll look back and realize that you weren't breaking. You were transforming. He signed it simply, Leo. He placed the letter in an envelope and taped it to a street light near the park. The same park where he had first taken that shaky morning walk months ago. The same place where everything began. As he stepped back and looked at it fluttering softly in the breeze, he smiled. Somewhere, someone would find it, and maybe, just maybe, it would help them start again. The sky was turning pink now. The first light of dawn touched the horizon. Leo closed his eyes, breathed in the cool air, and whispered, "I made it." But he didn't mean he had reached the end. He meant he had reached a beginning, one that would never stop unfolding. As he walked home, the narrator's voice rises softly, as if speaking not just to Leo, but to every listener, every learner, every heart still healing. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You can rebuild, and from zero, from pain, from nothing. You can fill your cracks with gold and call it art. You can choose to begin again, today. The music swells gently in the background, calm, warm, full of sunrise. And as Leo disappears into the morning light, his final words echo quietly, "I'm learning. I'm improving. I'm rebuilding. And now, I'm helping others do the same." The screen fades, leaving only a simple sentence, one that sums up everything he's lived and everything we can begin. Every crack holds gold. If you have the courage to rebuild, life doesn't rebuild in one day. It rebuilds one choice, one step, one breath at a time. Every time you let go of something heavy, you make space for something healing. Every time you forgive yourself, you grow lighter. So don't rush, don't compare. You're not behind. You're rebuilding. One day you'll look back and realize that the pain that broke you was the same pain that shaped you. So keep going, my friend. Clean one corner of your life today, then another tomorrow, and soon you'll stand in a space that feels like peace, a life you built with your own hands. Because even from the rubble, you can rise, stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than before.